Hello and welcome to Book Lovers Companion, the podcast about books, authors, their craft and more. My name is Edith and it is an absolute pleasure, dear listeners, to welcome you to episode 200, part 2. The all-male part 2. A great suggestion, and I think we should go with it, by one of my guests. And it is an absolute pleasure to welcome 5 charming authors, returning guests on the show for this panel episode. And here they are. Hello again, gentlemen, and it's lovely to have you on the show. And thank you again for doing this.
You're very welcome, and good evening from Dublin.
Welcome. And it's lovely to have you on. And I said before, all male part 2, because part 1 was a complete female panel with women's fiction writers. There was a discussion about what is women's fiction, actually. We don't know really. Everything in between, but what is not women's fiction is male fiction then? No, I don't know. Forget about it. Most of you nearly all of you write more or less similar genres, except maybe for Toby, he has a bit of a different genre. He writes but Rob, Creekmore, Alex Foster, Daniel Bautz, and Robert Craven, you all write suspenseful stories, thrilling
thrillers
stories.
And crime.
Yeah, exactly. And Toby, he is a bit different than the rest of you, but he will tell us more when it's his turn to inform us and introduce himself, who he is and what he writes. But I suggest we will start, before we start any discussion on this panel, with each of you introduce yourself, and like I said before, feel free to read a short passage from your book if you like, or explain how your book or books came about, and we will go from there. Sounds good, gentlemen?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Wonderful. Sounds great.
Okay, and I will start, since you are number 1 on the list, Rob Creekmore, you are the first, and I will hand the screen over to you.
Okay. Well, I don't just write thrillers. Actually, my first novel was a sci-fi novel, which really fucking sucked. So it never got published. But, everybody's first book is like that. And then I wrote a book called Prophet's Debt. And for some reason, it got picked up and published by a small press in Japan, of all places. And then it did well, and so they asked me to write 2 more, so I did. And so I was published 22, 23, 24, so a trilogy. And so I fulfilled all my contracts, and I actually just finished writing a literary fiction novel. So I took the concept of The Bell Jar, which is one of my favorite books, and I always had a problem with the fact that the people in those books from the mid-20th century in literary fiction were all young, affluent people from the Northeast having existential crises when, of course, people do from affluent backgrounds, but they had a lot of it was just dealing with, really no challenges in their lives and spiraling out from that. So I said, why not create a book that was literary fiction about a poor girl from Eastern North Carolina and a poor queer girl from Eastern North Carolina in the 1990s. And I wrote it as a novel. Not as a novel, as a diary. It's a novel, but it's a diary. It's called Diary of Attrition. And that's the one I'm rewriting right now. And I already have some interest in that one. I've actually already pitched my 6th novel to someone, and I've outlined it and given I've written a short story based on it as Tar River Boys, and you've seen that, and I've got some interest in that one. That's pretty cool. But I hadn't really thought about the reading and it might not really make a lot of sense to read anything from the Prophet series. Oh yeah, we're making a comic book there's a comic book being made out of the second 2 books, and so that's pretty cool. I just got nominated for Manly Way Wellman just this week. And I was a semifinalist with honorable mention for my short story, Soul Survivor, about 2 or 3 months ago for the Killer Shorts Award or something like that. Anyway, I didn't win, and actually don't expect to win the Manly Way Wellman. I'm kind of hoping my friend Natanya wins it because she's fantastic. And honestly, her book is better than mine. Let's see. So, Prophet's Debt basically like this. Girl from Eastern North Carolina gets sent away to conversion camp, gets tortured, raped, all of that. Escapes into the wilderness, survives, comes back for revenge. And then there's a whole lot of mythology behind it that's covered in the second and third books. It's pretty esoteric, which is why the award that I got nominated for is like speculative fiction, and it's certainly not mainstream by any stretch. The first one, despite being violent, is probably the most mainstream and has had the most mainstream success. So, Diary of Attrition, the one I just finished, it's a young girl's diary, she from the age of 14 to the age of 30. And, basically psychiatric hospital after watching her friend get murdered, sham marriage, sex work, heroin addiction, you name it. And she crawls her way out of it. And it's a happy-ish ending. And I always like to do a happy ending, but I did something more realistic and no superpowers, none of that kind of stuff like I did in the last 3 novels I wrote, which were basically about the origin story of a superhero, which is why it's getting made into a comic book. Anyhow, so I'm going to read something from Diary of Attrition because this hasn't been published, but I think this is a good paragraph to read because you don't have to have any context. All right. The library is one of the few places outside of church that the 2 of us are allowed to visit alone. Little do they know that the library is one of the most subversive places in town. There, tens of thousands of volumes filled with knowledge, often forbidden by the church, lie in wait for us to discover. Words of long-dead revolutionary thinkers transport the mind past restrictions of societal expectations and geographical restraints. What looks innocent to them is an act of surreptitious rebellion. That's it. And that's me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rob. And you do know that I absolutely love your Prophet series.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, it is the last 2 are really esoteric and weird. And you know what? That's me. I like writing that kind of stuff. And I created my own mythology, which is not easy to do. And I did it in 3 years.
Yeah, you always say weird, but weird in a good way, because like I said, I absolutely enjoyed it and I couldn't put it down, and I couldn't wait until all the parts were out. So
and the Prophet series is an allegory about the rise of Christian nationalism in a way. The first one's about the militia movement. The second one's about the megachurch movement. And the other one, the one right now, is about right now, which is about the return of a populist leader, basically a populist fascist leader that's hijacked evangelical Christianity to create a cult that became massively popular, who was funded by a very wealthy old money guy who owns a mine.
And all you had to do for that is open a newspaper.
Yeah, and I wrote that before all of this happened. I just kind of basically predicted it. And actually, in my 2014 sci-fi novel was about a pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
So the simulation's listening. I got to write some nice stuff.
Not necessarily. We just want to read you.
Yeah, but
read your books.
I've got to write something nice. So if the simulation's basing its future on what I write, then maybe I should write something really pleasant.
Don't have to.
I'm being facetious.
Yeah, you don't have to if you don't feel like it. If you think that's what moves you, that's what the story you want to tell, that's it, then why? It doesn't have to be pleasant.
I have 3 more novels planned now. I have a novella I'm writing next, and then Tar River Boys, and then I've got another novel that's what do you call it? A literary fiction novel. I've got a lot of them planned.
The Tar River Boys, you sent me the it started with a short story, didn't it? You sent it to me and I read it and I absolutely loved it. And are you turning it into a novel?
Yes.
Yeah.
I already have interest in that. I haven't even written it. I sat down at dinner. I won't say who they are, but they're, pretty cool. And I guess in the literary world, they're important. I mean, everybody's important just because they're humans, but they're important to that business. And pitched it and got a lot of positive feedback. And I often find myself in rooms, places that I don't belong, and I don't know how I get there, but I get there somehow.
Yeah.
But nothing ever comes of these fucking things. I've gotten a full read from anonymous content. And nothing came of it, and honestly, nothing's going to come of this either. But that's just how these people are. Like media people, like movie people, TV series people. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not. Who knows?
Maybe. Well, they cast a broad net and they throw back most of the fish they.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if they toss him back.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for Mari Hanna's books to made into a TV show. Robert Craven. You probably know her books.
Yeah, I've heard the name, but I haven't got around to reading many of them. Unfortunately, I don't really get a lot of time to read these days, which is a bit of a tragedy when I'm not writing. I'm actually able to try to work for a living, so that doesn't really help.
Yeah. But it's been announced, I think, years ago, and the last time I spoke to her, she said, "Oh yeah, it's still in the making. These things take time, and we are all waiting because I would love to see this TV show with my favorite character." So yeah, who knows? Maybe not.
Then they call it in development.
Yeah. That's what you read, Daniel.
What?
You are. Thank you, Robert. Oh, Rob, because we have two Roberts.
Thank you, Robert.
Everybody that knows me.
Yeah. Daniel, you would be next to introduce yourself, and if you like to read a short passage from one of your books, would it be okay for you?
Sure thing. I'm Daniel Bautz.
Change. The screen is all yours, Daniel.
I'm Daniel Bautz, and if you're not familiar with the work, you're probably not. I actually have 3 series going on right now. My first published book was Life is in the Blood, which is part of the Black Cathedral Covenant. It's about a preacher who is using the power of his blood to gain a following. And the preacher is actually a vampire. And it gets him into trouble, and a few other people are chasing him down. One is a writer, Brannigan Rafferty, looking for his next big story, and the other is the sheriff from the town, the last town that he was in, that he basically wiped out about 30 town members, and it kind of follows their chase to track down this vampiric preacher who is using the power in his blood. And that is Life is in the Blood, which is set in the 1800s. I have a middle grade series, Aristotle James Diaries, and those are kind of like I think Scooby-Doo meets Stranger Things, maybe, and the latest book is kind of like Scooby-Doo meets Hatchet. If you're familiar with that book, it's about a boy and his dog and kind of the paranormal adventures that he goes on. And then I have a paranormal thriller series set in the modern times, current time, that follows Winter Walker in his investigation into his daughter's death and leads him into a world of corporate espionage. So that's the 3 series I've got going on right now. That book is called Burn Out the Day. That's the Winter Walker thriller series. The latest book that I had come out would be book 2 in the Aristotle James Diary series, which is Aristotle James and the Waking Wild. And I'm just going to go read a small section of that to kind of get a feel. It's about Aristotle is on a fishing trip up in Michigan with his father, with his dog, and they're experiencing all kinds of weird things with nature up there, whether that's raccoons or elk or the weather. And so I'm going to get into that. I'm going to read a small excerpt from that right now. Plunk. The aluminum boat resonated. Something hit the side of the boat. Plunk, plunk, twice more. Plunk, plunk, plunk. I watched 3 small northern pike running headlong in the clear waters into the side of our boat. Hey, Dad, check out these crazy fish. What the heck is going on? Dad scratched his head as another pike joined the 3 other fish, inches from the boat that plunked against the sides. Then another. AJ stood up and barked at the growing crowd of the narrow torpedo-shaped fish crashing into the side of the aluminum hull. Then the shadow of a much larger fish came from the dark of the lake bottom. Another pike erupted from the water and into AJ. AJ rolled over the side of the boat and into the water. I almost jumped in, but the sound of the laughter pulled my attention toward the dock. An older man stood at the end watching us, laughing. He lowered a pipe from his mouth and blew a smoke ring toward the water. The smoke collided with the water, rolled over the ripples, spreading and dissipating as it came close. The pike disappeared back into the deep waters. AJ swam to the dock. The man knelt and helped my dog from the water. AJ shook the lake from his coat, and the man's laughter sped across the now glassy surface like the song of the loon, Menzabe. So that's from part 2, starting to build the mystery there. So that one just came out this past spring. I am currently working on the next book, the sequel to Life is in the Blood, and that will hopefully be out in the spring of 2026. So that's what I've got cooking. You can find me online on Instagram and, of course, on any of the major online booksellers.
Oh, Daniel, thank you. And my annoying question always when we meet, book 2 of your Western. I can't wait. What can I say? I know it's annoying when I ask you that, but it was just also a great book. And I also love your Aristotle James books.
It's not annoying. I'm always flattered that somebody is excited enough to ask me about when the next thing is coming, because that's what we all wish for. we don't want people to ask us when are you going to stop writing. So I'm always excited to hear that question.
And since you now told us it will be, is it absolute certain it will be out in spring 2026?
I can't say absolutely certain because nothing in this world is certain, but that is the plan. It should happen if the world doesn't implode or explode or any of the if the sun doesn't go out, we should see book 2 in the Black Cathedral Covenant series come out. And I'll go ahead and just say what the name is here. It's called the Hounds of Heaven.
Ooh, cool. And my favorite characters are still there.
They are. I don't know if everyone's going to be happy with how everything turns out for everybody, but that's okay. That's all part of storytelling.
I can't wait to read more about them. And also Aristotle James, is it, in your opinion, you are always at book fairs and so on, is it more successful? Do you sell more of your Aristotle James books than of your Western?
It depends on the crowd. Sometimes I'll sell like way more of one book than the other, but they're about the same. But it definitely attracts different readers.
Yeah.
A lot of moms and grandmas pick up the Aristotle James book for their younger ones. And for horror and horror adjacent isn't as popular as say like fantasy and things, even though it is still speculative. So.
Yeah. And what would you say? I've asked that before, but from your mouth, it would be, the word from the author. Which age group? Where would you put the Aristotle James books for which age group?
So book 1, 10 to 12. Book 2, it's advancing. It's getting more mature. So like 12 to 14. The book 3 will be a little bit older. I mean, and then so forth and so on. So it's a character that hopefully what people connect to it will be able to kind of grow with, and they won't have to cast it aside as they get older.
Good to know, because my students always ask, or not always, because who reads these days? They sometimes ask me for books they could read or shall read, especially English, since it's not their first language, and I would love to recommend your books.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have my books recommended. So.
Because I more or less force them, they have to read during the summer break. Not just watch TV or films, to get a feeling of the language, of the English language, but they also have to read. So that would be great.
Reading's a gift. So
yeah, exactly.
It's a gift.
And it would be, I will absolutely recommend it to my students. They are the perfect age group for this series.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next on Toby, another returning guest on the show. It's been not so long that we had a chat and recorded another episode for our podcast. Toby, please introduce yourself. Tell us about your book or books, and feel free to read a passage, and the screen is all yours. Or not.
Hi, everyone from Austin. Hi, everyone. I'm here in Austin, Texas, and I'm happy to be sharing my newest book with you, Soaked. My writing is, even though I'm here in Texas, most of my writing is based in Louisiana. I'm originally from Louisiana, of Cajun descent. And so I write a lot about my home culture, and I write a lot about the Louisiana culture, both past, present, and future. My previous novel is kind of more of a family saga about a Cajun family falling apart, and they don't know how to fit together as a family anymore. They don't know where they fit in their culture. But then when the patriarch passes away, it kind of teaches them where they belong, both with each other and within their culture. And then the book that I'll be reading from today is, it's actually a little bit more speculative in nature. It's a short story collection. And most of my writing, just so you know, is kind of more literary in nature. But this short story collection is actually based 50 years in the future, after climate change has intensified and half of the bottom of the state of Louisiana is underwater. Louisiana is currently in the crosshairs of climate change. We are sinking, we are washing away, and we are also just being inundated by the sea. So a lot of the place that I call home is going to look different in the coming years. So I decided in these short stories to start looking at, of course, the geography, the actual land is going to change. But what about us as a people? What about our culture? So each of the short stories is focused on a different piece of the culture. One's about music, one is about food, language, government. So each one tries to capture a different piece of our culture. The passage I'm going to read is actually from the anchor story that the book is named after, Soaked. So in this story, it's an old farmer who has he's a multi-generational farmer. This farm has been in his land for generations. He actually is one of the last farmers who has privately owned land. And he can't grow anything because the land has become so wet that it can't sustain anything. And he's about to give it all up when his grandson shows up with this bright idea for him to start growing marijuana and create a marijuana farm. And so it kind of becomes a metaphor for how we pass on our knowledge generationally. So I decided to read one of the more tense moments about what a farmer thinks about himself and what a farmer thinks about relationships with others and the land. "Why do you always do that?" Quinlan asks, perverting the silence. "Do what? Why do you always shut people down?" This is what Catcher avoids. This is why he and his son couldn't get along. No matter if what he does is working, for him or for anybody else, he has to justify it and is expected to change. He gently toes a 3-inch tall soybean sprout. "You see this plant? If you give it what it needs and not too much of what it doesn't, it'll thrive. It'll provide for you every single time. And it does its best work when it's left alone." From the confused look on the stoner's face, he can tell Quinlan doesn't get it. but it doesn't shut him up. Quinlan looks from sprout to sprout, trying to figure it out. Catcher's not sure, but he can almost see a farmer's twinkle in the boy's eye. Quinlan follows him as he slowly walks the field, checking each sprout. Catcher hears the air again. Nearly an hour passes before either of them say anything. This is what farming used to be. It's Catcher who speaks. Why'd it change? Depends on who you ask. What do you think happened? We forgot how small we are. These plants know. They're prepared for the day-to-day battles. It makes them adapt. When you lose those little battles over and over, you learn what's important. You know your place. And if you're not in your place, you move toward it. Stop losing the little ones. You'll end up thinking you're big and lose the big battles because of it. Quinlan is quiet for a second, taking in the philosophy of his elder. There's only one thing to make this old world knowledge make more sense. Let's go get high. So this was, as I said, the anchor story in Soaked. A lot of my writing, again, is focused around Louisiana. I have another novel that I'm trying to get out there right now that's a post-Katrina world. It's right after Hurricane Katrina happens, and it's about a woman and her neighbor trying to survive in a flooded city. But because she is a Black woman and he is a white man, the racism that's been hard baked into their lives makes it hard for them to trust each other. So it's a lot about overcoming racism to survive as a whole. So that's what I'm working on right now. I have some things that are starting to actually move out of Louisiana. I have some other books that are, again, more climate focused, but take us down to Chile and even Antarctica and possibly to Mars. So I'm kind of all over the place when it comes to my writing, just thinking about climate, culture, all of those different things.
And not letting yourself be pigeonholed by the genre, maybe?
I don't know if I fit in any genre, to be honest.
Yeah. But what I said when we spoke on the show about the collection of short stories, I mean, it's interesting what you said and what is important to you are not losing yourself, not losing your culture, not losing who you are. That's what's going to happen, or that's the thread in the book. And I mean, you
Yes.
especially know what I mean, what I talk about, because the background of your culture, the Cajun culture, I mean, people tried, didn't they?
It's starting to fade away. I mean, it's been systematically, there have been ways that, pieces of Cajun culture have been erased through Americanization, trying to get us to stop speaking French, commercializing our food. Like there's a lot of things that has come in to try and shift the way the culture moves. And yes, to your point, I do believe knowing where you come from and knowing who you are is part of what I think takes us into the future a little bit more deliberately and intentionally. I think there are certain pieces of culture that should be left behind, quite frankly, kind of, some of the uglier pieces of our history we need to learn from and move past. But also being intentional about what pieces we bring forward so that it can benefit the next generation.
Mm. Yeah.
There's a lot of old world wisdom and natural wisdom that I think translates well into where we're heading.
Not clinging to it. What you said, I mean, not really leaving behind, but not forgetting about it. Let's not forget about it, because if you forget about it, you might, as the saying goes, you're forced to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. Yeah. Alex, you're next. A nice little murder.
Hello. I'm calling in from Washington, D.C. I was a prosecutor for 20 years, and then I opened up my own law firm and represented criminal defendants for another 15 years. So I've had 35 years of experience inside the courtroom. I've always loved the books of John Grisham and Agatha Christie, James Patterson. And so I wrote a book in the legal thriller genre. My first book is gavel to gavel. There we go. So I can get it in the frame. And then 2 years later, I wrote my second book, which is called Double Blind. There we go. And both of them are about a prosecutor who is handling a very complex murder trial, and all of the characters inside a courthouse. It's part of my series, which is called the Seneca County Courthouse series. And it follows the exploits of Mac McIntyre, who's my protagonist prosecutor. It's kind of like the Hardy Boys would be, but for adults, where you have the same setting, the same characters, and then a different murder trial for each book. So I'd like to read the opening chapter, or actually the opening paragraph only, of Double Blind. And it's the very first paragraph, and it starts with a murder. Chapter 1. The first shot was not fatal. It skipped down the center of Jamal's scalp from front to back, parting his hair like a comb. Blood cascaded in equal quantities down both sides of his face, curving around each of his ears in semicircles. The second shot killed him. The copper-jacketed hollow point bullet hit Jamal's cheekbone, sending a hailstorm of metal slivers and bone fragments through his brain, exiting from the back of his skull. His large body crashed downward onto a glass coffee table beneath him, smashing it into pieces. By the time he hit the table, his brain had ceased functioning, and his heart, no longer receiving signals, stopped beating. And then we move on, of course, from that. But that's how we like to start off with a bang, so to speak. So I'm working on my third book, which is a locked room mystery inside the courthouse, where one of the jurors in a jury trial is murdered, and you have a limited number of suspects. So I'm kind of paying homage to the great Agatha Christie novels like Murder on the Orient Express and Then There Were None. And it also has elements of 12 Angry Men, the famous black and white movie about a jury deliberation. So that's what I do. And I'm pleased to be with the group.
Oh, thank you, Alex. It was an intriguing start of the second novel. And I was wondering, I think I've asked you that when we spoke for the episode, but who's your to-go forensic pathologist for these kind of descriptions? Or is it all from your experience as a prosecutor?
Well, I've done over 100 jury trials, and as a prosecutor, you encounter DNA and ballistics and autopsies and all types of forensic evidence. So I'm relying mostly on my own personal experiences inside the courtroom. And I put in my books a lot of authenticity so that the readers feel like they're part of a jury and they're presented with a new case. And then they decide which way they feel the defendant is guilty or not guilty.
Oh, okay. No. Okay, and the second, Robert, last but not least, my European backup, Robert.
Fellow European, yeah,
yes, yeah, indeed. Please introduce yourself and feel free to read a short passage from one of your books, and the screen is all yours.
Good evening, Edith. Thank you, Rob, Daniel, Toby, and Alex. My name is Robert Craven, and I'm the author of 10 books. First 5 were World War II espionages featuring a female protagonist called Ava Molinar. Various critics described it as James Bond with nail varnish, but I decided just to do 5 books, and I set them starting in the book burning of Berlin in 1933 and finishing in the aftermath in Berlin in 1946. And then at that stage, I'd written 2 other books, a small experiment with steampunk called A Mandarin Cipher, and then I had 1 book that I pitched as a kind of James Bond adventure, taking the opposite side of the coin and calling it The Road of 1,000 Tigers. So come 2020, COVID hits and Ireland is absolutely locked down like a drum. We're not allowed to travel any more than 3 kilometres from where we live. And I'm fortunate to live on the east coast between Dublin and Drogheda. And we face an island about 7 miles away called Lambay, which is owned by the De Beers family, and no one can actually visit it. So on our daily walks, when we weren't working, myself and my wife walked along the stretch of beach, and an idea started to pop into my head. What if a body was found on an island that no one can get into? I suppose very much like Alex, a kind of spin on the closed room, except it's a closed island. And that gave me A Kind of Drowning, which features a disgraced Garda inspector. The Gardaí are the Irish equivalent of the police force. He's been videotaped beating a man, and it goes viral, and as a result is suspended. So he goes on the run and hides in a small town called Rosscarrig, where a body of a young girl is discovered washed up on the shore. And he begins to slowly piece himself together, and the case. The book did very well. Once again, we were locked down for almost 9 months on and off, so I had a lot of time to write, and I nearly put 12, 14 hours a day in on it. It went through 13 drafts and got released in 2021 and did very, very well. So at this stage, I decided to continue this, and the next book in the Crow investigation is Malign Intent. And this is set in Rosscarrig, but involves the death of a journalist. I'm going to just read a small passage for you to give you a flavour of what it's about. Malign Intent, Chapter 22. Crow slewed his car down the estuary road. The recent downpour had turned it into an unforgiving quagmire. He kept the driver's side window down, keeping one eye on the edge of the bank. It was high tide and the waves lapped the verge. The estuary looked deep and dangerous with an undercurrent below the surface. There was no sign of Hannifan's demise apart from a fragment of fluttering police tape. Crow unravelled it from the gorse and pocketed it. The air smelled of rain, sea spray, and clouds, magnifying the distant lighthouse several miles away. A shore breeze tugged at his clothes. It was cold. Crow pulled on a black, thick woolen hat, work gloves, and his Wellingtons. He unpacked a heavy torch he'd purchased at the local hardware store. Switching it on, the torch pierced the low afternoon light with an incisive burst of pure white. He shrugged on his heavy coat and trudged to the yew tree where Hannafin had been found. A naked raw oval stood out on the trunk where forensics had cut down the branch with all of its grisly load. He pushed past into the dense copse of hazel trees, panning the torch across the knotted roots and wild flowers. A verdant wave of rotting leaves caused him to gag. It smelled like the centuries of detritus and bark had lain undiscovered, carpeting the earth below it in a tightly packed strata. He didn't believe for 1 minute the media Sally Hannafin hadn't had his phone with him. But then Crow also believed Hannafin, suffering from MS, must have had a walking stick. This hadn't shown up, and without the rope, Crow had absolutely nothing to build his suspicions on. The stick would be bigger than a phone, and possibly handier to dispose of by Hannafin's assailants. Dodging prickling black branches that whipped into his face, Crow stepped gingerly, avoiding potential trips. He was grateful for the boot's protection, though his knees and thighs were jabbed and snagged without mercy. He was making slow headway. If anything, the closely knit hazel trees seemed to get thicker and less forgiving. They made the roof of blackness even that the torch's powerful beam struggled to illuminate. Crow paused. He opened his mouth slightly to improve his hearing. A crack of wood. A snap. Something heavenly and definitely not four-legged. Crow held his breath for a beat longer. He panned the beam around. For a split second, the light found an outline, the shape of a person, a shape now rushing away in the opposite direction to the beam. It was so brief he couldn't rule out that he was just seeing things. Stunned and scratched below the eye, Crow straightened himself and rummaged around the leaves for the torch. He was aware of a sudden pressing gloom, and he looked over his shoulder, the stinging eyes seeking sunlight. His fingers found the solid rubber of the handle and aimed the torch toward the glint of metal. In seconds, he'd acquired it. He estimated it was only 2 or 3 yards into the woods, but it felt like it was the bottom of the sea. Jamming the torch into a branch, freeing his hands, Crows reached forward and grabbed it. It was cold, a burning cold to the touch. It was a handle. Crow carefully eased it up and held it. It was a silver-handled cane, a brand new silver-handled cane, ebony black. Engraved on the side of a fox ran the inscription, A.H., the dream is already ended, and we're already awake in the golden eternity, said Crow. A quote from Jack Kerouac. It was the kind of hero gonzo journalist would have had. This was Hannafen's walking stick. It had been thrown like a javelin into the wood. It would have lain there under the carpet of duff and humus, lost and perhaps only discovered by chance in another century, faded and soiled by the earth. That's the passage. It involves Crow investigating a potential suicide. He doesn't believe it is. It's too convenient. The rope has gone missing and the walking stick has gone missing along with all the valuables. The estate is owned by a rich judge who's very powerful and about to take a seat on the European Judicial Council. And that is the story.
Thank you, Robert. And absolutely gripping and fascinating. And we had a lot to talk about when you were on the show about this book of yours.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in this book, in all of your books, actually. No matter the genre, no matter where it's set. Yeah. And may I ask?
It's set mainly in the area that I live in. Yeah, we live right beside the sea. There's an awful lot of greenhouses, and I live actually in the market garden of Ireland. So there's an awful lot of agricultural events happening.
Yeah.
But also, just to touch on Toby's object there, we are conscious of climate change. We live not more than about a mile away from the beach. It's a flat level, and if the sea levels rise, obviously the town will be under threat. And there is this element all the time of a ticking time bomb, both weather-wise. What I generally do is expose Crow to an awful lot of the weather we get here along the coast. We're always 10 degrees cooler than inland for starters, and we get a lot of fogs, we get a lot of rain. And sometimes, as if you could look outside my window here now, it's absolutely raining cats and dogs for June. So I try to bring those elements into the story, create atmosphere. And I think both the island, the town, and the overall areas around should be part of the story. It's not just about one man investigating. It's one man who's a city guy. He's known nothing but city beats thrown into a rural backwater, and finding crime just seems to land in his direction all the time.
Mm. And it's interesting what you said about climate change. I mean, we are talking big on destroying nature, and it's even the small things people do. Maybe you've heard about this warning about the Giant's Causeway. It was in the news, I think, this week, that people tend to stick coins in between these pillars.
Yeah, it's a tradition that's built in to bring luck, but all it's just doing is damaging very valuable scenic areas. I mean, the same thing as where the Star Wars movies, the Rise of Skywalker, the Skellig Islands, but since the Star Wars phenomenon kicked off with the latter three movies, valuable kind of monastic sites that are over 1,500 years old are getting damaged by sightseers coming to see where Luke Skywalker holed up and did his last years as part of it. So there is this conscious tug all the time that Ireland is very dependent on the tourism industry, but also the tourists have to respect the areas that they come visit. It's a balancing act, a fine act in many ways.
I think this could be said about all the popular places in Europe, couldn't it? Think of Rome.
Yeah.
There was this tourist who felt the need to, I don't know, scratch his name into the Colosseum or something like that. Oh, just just like that, and other sites. And the trouble we have with Chinese tourists here in Austria, in Hallstatt, they just go into the houses and sit there at, excuse me, it's not a museum. People live there. Don't go inside, just like that. But that's what they do. You know,
Very good.
because they have
Yeah.
So they have Hallstatt in China, and in China it's a museum, but it's not a museum here. It's just a village.
Right. But as I said, so Malign Intent, it is available now both as a Kindle paperback and hardback. Very handsome book, and I'm in the current process of pretty much 3/4 of the way through his third investigation. I have a tendency to kill my little darlings off. I generally only go about 4 or 5 books. I really don't want Crow to become sort of a shabby Irish Columbo. I think I probably will kill him off at some stage. Maybe book 5 could be just he drinks himself to death or something like that.
Because he's Irish, he drinks himself to death.
Because he's Irish, exactly. We don't drink ourselves to death. We just we pickle ourselves.
Okay. And may I ask you, gentlemen, we spoke a little bit about this before we started the recording, and before I think every one of you was here. There is, I don't know if you heard about it, there is this new publishing house, a new and independent publishing house, and an all-male publishing house called Conduit Books.
Right.
And it was found. Yeah, it was founded for
could you
literary
spell that,
fiction.
please, Edith?
Yeah, and memoirs, and it's for more representation of male voices, according to the owner and founder, and because of the marginalization of male writers, and the so-called death of the male novelist. So, gentlemen, what is your take? I think Alex is at least partly agreeing with the worry or the question. What is your take on this, gentleman?
Well, I would say that the publishing industry, it appears to me, is fairly well dominated by women, but I don't see a need to have an all-male publishing house. To me, that seems kind of like an overreaction. So I wouldn't send any of my manuscripts to a place that was viewing the world in that kind of binary separation of men and women. We're all in this together. My readership is largely female. Most of my readers are women. So I would resist the urge to define a writer by his gender or a publisher by gender issues. And while I recognize there's a lot of women who are dominating this field, I don't think it's necessary to have an all this or an all that publishing house.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree there. I do agree with that one. I don't think it should be isolated down to gender in any way. But my own spin is that Ireland is predominantly dominated by women writers, but just they are so good at what they do. And my own view is sometimes a woman can write a man's character much more than a man can write a woman's character, because I think they understand nuances and sensory vibes thereafter.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else would like to share with us?
I don't fuck with incels or male rights people. The Andrew Tates of the world can jump off a goddamn bridge, as far as I'm concerned. A tall one.
Okay, Toby, what is your take?
I was just gonna.
Yeah.
I agree with everything that's been said. I'd actually, just to go with what Mr. Craven said about, I think if male writers are feeling insecure inside of the industry, we just need to write better. I think that's the bottom line. If we need to write better books, write better characters, I think that's what will make us stand out. If there's anything that's going to make us stand out, it'll be our writing.
Yeah. Quality of writing, quality of products that you're putting out has to be the highest standard, and attention to detail I think is vital as well. You can't really be lazy at this game. There's just too many at it, and mistakes aren't tolerated on any level.
Hey, Edith, I wanted to add one other comment. My books do have sex scenes, which I think readers enjoy. But I think a man has to be very, very careful how he writes a sex scene. For example, in my last book, the prosecutor has sex with a girlfriend in his office. And I sent that chapter to a number of my female friends, a woman judge, a couple of female attorneys, to see if I was writing anything that might be objectionable from a woman's perspective. Because of the imbalance of power, you had a prosecutor having sex with someone who worked for him. And I didn't want to get into any Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky type of references. So it was helpful for me to show that chapter to a couple of women. And they actually pointed out a couple of things that I changed. So that was a good idea on my part, I think.
Very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, sex scenes are incredibly just so hard to write well. The one lesson I've learned, the first 5 books, I did do it from the viewpoint of Ava being a seductress, and looking back on it now, very much like what Alex did, I sent it out to a few female readers who thoroughly liked it. They liked the fact that she was in power and that she was controlling the whole situation. But as I get older and I write more and more, I suppose, complex books, I think less is more in everything like that. Less is more in violence, less is more in sex, and less is more even in foul language. I know that my detective swears like a trooper, but it also has to have an element of fun to it. It's not there for... I don't think gratuitous is going to work this day and age in anything at the moment.
And it's also interesting that you
sex
said...
scenes are a lot like writing.
Yeah, they are hard to write.
Fight scenes and sex very fight scenes and sex scenes are very similar.
Yeah.
And don't you often ask yourself, why do I even bother with including it? Just go without it?
Yeah, well, if it propels the plot in a certain way, I don't throw it in for the sake of it. It has to have rooted in the plot, or it has to have some rationale behind plot development. You just, a classic example, I suppose, of that is actually one of my favorite books, which is Jaws, where a ridiculous scene happens between Brody's wife and Matt Hooper. And it turns out that when you read the background to the book, the publishers put it in without Benchley's authorization or permission. And it was one of the most ridiculous parts of the book that was otherwise a small classic.
Yeah, well, I also found interesting what you said, Robert, about female writers writing male characters better sometimes than male authors. I was wondering, writing a female character as a male author, do you ask yourself troubling questions? Did I get that right? Did I not get that right? Because, like you said, there are so many obstacles. And
there was actually... Well, I got in touch with a few female writers and asked them how to approach this, and one actually came out with a very good idea that it's not gender, it's the person, that you get good women, good men, bad men. So what you need to do is pare it down to who the character is and what motivates them. So I found that when I am writing female characters, I generally think of them as a person, not a gender. And that way the ideas flow a little easier. Obviously, women are far more sensitive. I think they're more aware of the area around them. Men just kind of wander in and happen, whereas women take a number of things in. So if, for example, I have a female protagonist walking into a room full of people, I will have her picking off elements in her head of who's likable, who's dangerous, who she can look at, and I take it on from there. But essentially, it boils down to people are people. Doesn't matter what the gender is.
I would agree with you, and what you just said about women, because the teacup and I spoke the other day, how we perceive our surroundings differently than you men do, because sometimes when you are out and about in the city and so on, you often look around and there's a lot going on in your head. Things you, as a man, you don't have to think about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It doesn't happen to you, or it might never happen to you. It might, but most of the time, let's be honest here, it won't. Yeah, and that's a big part how we look at our surroundings, how we act probably as women. But when you speak of characters, like you said, Robert, I would agree. It's about the character. It's not so much which gender this person has, but what kind of personality your character has, what kind of person he or she is.
I had a very
with Robert,
visceral
100%.
experience.
Sorry, gentlemen. Okay, Toby, you go first, please.
I was just going to add that I had a very visceral experience with my wife about exactly what you just said. We were walking through San Antonio one day, and I noted that there was some sort of feature on a building, and she said, I never saw that. And I said, how can you miss it? It's this giant thing. And she said, I was watching the guy that walked by because he was acting weird. And I was watching this other person over here, just thinking about, the surroundings and what danger may be in the environment. Another thing that I actually like to think about when I'm writing women characters is, what are they talking about? What concerns them? I forget the feminist theorist that said this, but how much of a book is often women characters talking about men, and being mindful of how much is what your woman's characters in the book are to serve the male characters. So it's something that I think about a lot whenever I'm writing any passage, anything in my books is men the forefront, are the male characters what is about, or are the women having their own agency, having their own lives, having their own concerns, including maybe I need to watch out for that guy, but also what is it that what are my goals that are separate from men in the work?
Rob?
Good point, actually. Yeah, I do like that.
So, sorry, Rob wants first. Sorry, Robert. Yeah, Rob.
I 100% agree with what Robert Craven said. I 100% agree with him. And actually, I said as much on a panel a couple of years ago, and it made a lot of people angry.
Really?
That
Okay.
women have to understand men better because men are dangerous, and we all look alike. Dangerous men look the same as not dangerous men.
Yeah,
that's all. I think you're dead on right.
Daniel, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening.
What is your take on this, writing female characters, or how women have to perceive their surroundings, their environment?
What I love about writing is the fact that, and I know you hear a lot of different thoughts about how you're supposed to write characters that are different from who you are as the author. But what I love about writing is that if you're doing it right, you're in the headspace of the character. And I think every character that you write deserves to have you put yourself in their head and look at the world through their perspective. And in that capacity, I think anybody can write any character. I mean, you're obviously going to send things out to beta readers and whatnot and get the feedback to make sure that you're hitting those notes, that they read true. But going back to what Robert Craven said, and even Creekmore, what Rob said as well, is that, women have different concerns than men, and it's largely an unsafe world for them. And that's like a big perspective shift. But if you're willing to put yourself in that headspace, I think writing a woman character or a female character when you're not a female is definitely something that you can do. I know with Life is in the Blood, I had a female protagonist and a female antagonist, and I felt, and the feedback I've got from them is that I pretty much hit on the head what I should have with those characters.
And you did it so well.
I think it is a good idea to get women to see what you're writing. My wife is very good at that, but also there's other beta readers that I would send it out to who are female, just to get their feedback as well. But like that, I did come across a very interesting comment that was said once about writing dialogue, that men speak to each other in a competitive fashion, but women speak to each other in a kind of supportive and encouraging way. And I do find that as well. If you ever see two women talking, it's very rare that they're trying to compete, whereas men, just naturally by our very nature, are quite competitive and will try to sort of out talk or out brag or out boast one another. So that's always a useful kind of technique as well, that generally women are supportive of each other, and I generally do dialogue that way. Then sometimes you get that kind of clash of that men being slightly combative versus the woman who's always kind of compassionate. So you can bring elements of friction into a dialogue that make it lift a little bit.
Oh, Robert, I have so to disagree with you there. Because
I grew up in a salon.
I feel as if men are far more honest in this regard than we women are. We are far meaner.
All right, okay. There you go. I got that one wrong.
In this regard than you men are. You men are straight to the point. Whereas we women we can be so mean, and so much of backstabbing goes on with talking amongst women. So you men are
Right.
you're in each other's faces and more honest than we are. Maybe because you haven't learned it the way you have. That's something I always wonder. You men, you always learn how to be honest and in each other's faces, because often boys are encouraged to be that way. Whereas we women, we have to be nice and gentle and do not offend anyone, and speak quietly and be more female. And that's where the meanness comes in then. You get frustrated with the things you can't say out loud, straight out loud, and then you have to be mean in a way, far meaner than men are. And look at the way women talk about other women. For example, when there is an election on, what do they focus on? Not what the woman is saying. I've been thinking about a lot of Angela Merkel. I'm not a huge fan of her, don't get me wrong. Or any other female politician also here in Austria. All they talk about is what she wears and about her hair and whatnot. What? Who cares? I don't care what she wears. What is she talking about? But that's what women do. Just saying.
I grew up in a salon, all like when I was a little kid, all women. So I was completely, they didn't take into account that I was listening because I was a little kid. And you know what? If you don't like, it's not all, but like, damn, if you want to get your feelings hurt, that is the place to get your feelings hurt. And getting your feelings hurt doesn't heal as quickly as getting a black eye, which is what men do to each other. We fight it out pretty much over. We shouldn't be doing that shit. No, don't get me wrong. But as little boys, that's what we do. And then a lot of times we're just buddies after that, and
it's forgotten about. I know where you're coming.
Yeah. But I absolutely agree with what you said, Rob, because I worked at a boarding school, and I worked with the girls and I worked with the boys. Guess which I preferred?
The boys, I would say.
Yes, the boys. Yeah, because it was so much easier. Yeah, you told them what's what, and that's it. With girls, it was always, another discussion, and why, and it was never ending. Yeah. The boys just accepted it when you said do this, do that. The girls, it was always discussion, and going on, and yada, yada, yada. Oh, it was so tiresome. Oh dear. Another question for you, gentlemen. All of you are independent authors. How would you describe, or how would you say, which are the biggest challenges for you as indie authors to get published, to get your books out there? What did you have to do to get out there? What do you still have to do? What is the most important parts to be seen, to be heard, to be bought by your audience? Who would
Well,
like
I'm
to
kind
start?
of in there
Robert, yeah.
with Rob there because I was signed to a couple of small presses. My first book, Get Lennon, took about 5 years to get out. I don't know if you chaps are familiar with the Autonomy platform, but I loaded the book onto that, and this was a peer review platform, and you kind of voted for books, honored books, and eventually my book got to number 50, and I got picked up by a small UK press. And they published the book, and it did quite well. But the problem with small presses is they close and close down very quickly. So I was kind of this vagrant for about 4 or 5 years of other books as I was building up this reputation of going in and out of small presses. And they kept going bust, and then you'd be caught in a lengthy period of trying to get all your material back. So around about 2017, I decided to go down the indie route, and I just picked 2 platforms, which was the Amazon KDP and Kobo. And from there, I just released all my books, and I've used them since. What I do find, and I'm not sure if the US is any different, but there is a slight literary snobbery in Ireland that you really have to be published. You have to be picked by an agent, and you have to go out through a publishing house. So the way I do it is that I got myself a website. I got it well made. I got back links into it. If you go to my Instagram page, you'll find my website. And I just find most of my time just getting the book noticed can be hard work. So all I can say is, in my experience, it very much is a labor of love. Independent, Amazon and Kobo are pretty much dirty words in Ireland. You go to any kind of literary event and they ask you who you're signed to, where you're coming out of, and you say, "Oh, no, I'm self-published," or "I'm an indie." And you just get that little hint off them of, right, okay, yeah, you're not really a writer then, are you? So I just get bloody minded about it. I was a musician in the 80s. I played everything from punk to heavy metal to jazz. And my approach has always been this kind of DIY approach of just getting it out there, linking it as much as I can, and trying to stay active on social media.
Alex, what is your take on getting your work out there?
Well, when I first sent my manuscript to the agencies in New York looking for a literary agent, I was very frustrated because it did swell a lot of interest, but it took so long to get everything going. One agent took like 6 months to return an email, and I just can't operate at that kind of speed. So my books are hybrid published, which, you have traditional publishing, which Mr. Craven's talking about. And then you have self-publishing, which is basically a Xerox machine. But hybrid publishing, you have a publisher. I work with Paper Raven Books, and they collaborate with you, and they have some skin in the game. If your book does well, they do better. And so that's what I've done, and I was very pleased with the product. The book cover's good, the proofreading was good, and together we worked on it. And then so I decided to stay with that, even though my first book sold 10,000 copies on Amazon and did quite well with the numbers. I like the freedom and independence of making all my own decisions. So I'm going to continue that way. And of course, someone comes out of the blue and wants to give me some great offer, but I'm not holding my breath for that. I'm going to keep going and do it myself.
Daniel,
right on. Brilliant.
Sorry. Yeah. Daniel, what about you?
Well, for me, I mean, my first book that came out was Life is the Blood, and it went through a small press. And Aristotle James followed, and then my third novel, Burn Out the Day, came after that. What I found myself doing was all the legwork. I mean, I'm sure you're all aware of. You all have your platforms. You build your platforms out, and you try to drive your audience to your book or make them aware of it. That's always the struggle. The struggle was no different with the small press or me putting them out myself. So I went back to my publisher, who's awesome, and they gave me the opportunity. They put their money where their mouth was. They supported my work. But I was like, look, I'm doing all the legwork. I've got to come to you to order author copies. I've got to do that. Could I get the rights back to my work? And I formed my own publishing company. And I figured I have a label. I can build that label at the same time and also support my work that way. But I don't have to worry about what Robert was saying, that small press disappears, and then I've got this struggle trying to find how to get my rights back to publish everything. So I just kind of took the bull by the horns after the third book came out and said, look, I'm doing all the legwork. I might as well be doing it for myself with no split.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah. Toby, what about you? What about your experiences?
So I went to the small press route, 2 different small presses. It's the biggest struggle is just connecting with the readers who would want to read your work, finding who those readers are. I tend to prefer a very hands-on approach. I love going to book festivals. I love going to book signings, meet and greets, any of those things. So that's honestly where I get the word out about my books. But the smaller companies, they're they don't have a giant marketing team or anything like that. They do some social media work. So a lot of it is I have to do it myself on my own marketing team. But again, the way I like to do it is one-on-one, hands-on, get to talk to somebody, hear their story. And that's my favorite way to do it.
Rob, what about you? North Carolina.
I'm just
said it before,
flailing
there's
around.
something in the water there because there's so many good authors coming out of North Carolina. But how do you do it?
And Virginia. I don't like, this is just a hobby that got out of control. Just like how I make moonshine, except I don't sell it, and it's legal to sell books. So I was like on Twitter when it was fuck it, it's still Twitter. And there's this author that I followed, and they were like, "Oh, I hate it when a protagonist doesn't learn their lesson about revenge and how it's wrong." And I said, the moral of story of the book that I wrote, and I hadn't submitted it to anyone because I don't give a shit. Was that some motherfucker need killing? I mean, Bukowski said don't try. That's kind of like what I'm doing. Although I don't 100% like Bukowski, anyhow. Anyway, the publisher was like, I want to read that. And so I sent it to the publisher. 2 days later, I got an offer. You rewrite it this way because it started in the middle and then they wanted it first person linear. And, I got to the end, I gave it to them. They wrote me a check, and then they gave me more options and they wrote me a couple more checks. So I don't know. My website's a piece of shit. It's just like a list of blog posts, but it gets thousands of hits. And I get invited to go all these places, New York, Baltimore. I'm reading in Baltimore in a couple months. I was just in Nashville doing a charity event, and I got invited back to do like a workshop, and I get award nominations and shit like that for I don't know why. And I've met just a lot of people, and those people are great, and that's the thing. Like when you meet people, a lot of times opportunities happen, even if you're not like after it. And in person, it's really, really, really hard to ignore me. I don't necessarily on this, but have fun to tell personality on this, and simultaneously I'm like this, and also a fairly sizable person. So everybody else is already here, so like just can't fucking miss me. My hair looks like this. I'm wearing a shirt that says Nazi lives don't matter, and that's just like part of my fucking wardrobe. I got tattoos, I sound like this, and I say whatever the fuck I want, and no, and I guess the writing's good. And I think that's part of the reason the writing is good, because I don't give a shit. Like if I ever get published again, I'm thinking about like the book I just wrote. I might not even I might be done. I might not submit anything ever again. I may just sit on these and give them to my friends, and then if I die, then maybe they can get put out there, because I'm kind of disillusioned with the whole thing, because it's a lot of people that it's like a fucking business, and I'm an artist.
Yeah,
I'm not in this business.
that's an interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm not going to be a bestseller. I know that shit. So have fun, man. You know,
just do it because you want to do it. Yeah.
It's an excuse for me to go drinking with my writer friends. and I have to say, like, that's the best part of all of this. Like, I've made so many good friends and people that, like, I genuinely like, you know, writer or not, in this little world. In fact, I'm wondering if Alex, do you know Mark Bergen? Do you know Mark Bergen?
No, I don't.
His wife is a lawyer in DC. Ruth Bergen.
There's only a few lawyers in Washington D.C.
He's a buddy of mine. He's a retired cop, and he writes really great, like, investigative stuff. And you should have him on. Mark Bergen. I can give you his. I love him. As his writing and as a person, he's a fantastic person.
Okay, I would love to have him on the show. Can you ask him to send me an email?
You got it.
Okay, splendid. As for the drinking, sorry about that, but it is so hot here in Vienna, so I just brought water with me. Otherwise, I would have brought some Guinness or whiskey, but it's so hot. Sorry about that.
Well, this is water.
Yeah,
it looks like I have a beer.
Yeah, I usually do a little bit of, you know, I think I had Guinness with you, Robert, didn't I, when we met?
Yeah, we had Guinness on St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, I was working my way through a nice 12-year-old malt, and the conversation deteriorated rapidly after that.
Yeah. Like they always do on our show, don't they? We are known for that. Gentlemen, is there anything else you would like to add? Anything I forgot to ask you? Anything that is absolutely important to you and you would like to get out there?
Well, the only thing I want to say is that Rob, Toby, and Alex make a very good point as to why we want to stay indie, and that's the freedom to write what we want and not do it for the market's sake. I had a dream when I started writing my first book, Get Lennon, that it was going to be the next Jack Higgins or next Frederick Forsyth. And the harsh reality was that it is incredibly hard work. And what I've learned through the 10 books that I've written over the past 19 years, I enjoy the freedom of writing what I want and not having anybody tell me that's not going to work. And I do very much think that if sometime in the future I ever land a publishing deal, I'm probably going to be very difficult to work with.
I'd say good for you. Anybody else would like to add something? Anything I didn't ask? I forgot to mention. Let me know. No?
No, I'm here pimping my friends out to get on your show.
Good.
That's the important thing, and that's the thing. Like,
and I will tune in to see what your friends look like. That will definitely be on top of my viewing list.
my friends do not look like what you would think they look like. They're all over the place. One thing I do, and it's helped me with my writing, is I actually set up my own reading here. I do a quarterly reading. And it's called Noir at the Bar. Y'all probably heard of it. And I do one in Eastern North Carolina, and I pack it out most go rounds.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of fun. And it's a way to meet people. It's definitely not like a business choice, but it's a way to develop yourself by listening to other people read and listening to the way they read their work, not just reading it, but how it comes from them. So if you can do something like that where you live, it's a great opportunity to, like I said, what's important is as other people and friends. It's not these publishing deals. And I've slowed down purposefully. Like I was just getting reamed going, like getting all these deadlines, and I'm still writing. I'm just writing at my own pace. And maybe if you start getting, then that's what you should do.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree. Gentlemen, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you, having you on, and connecting you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for doing this. Please don't go away. Wait for me in the green room. I will be with you shortly.
Very good.
Thank you, Edith.
Good. My pleasure.
Thank you, Edith.
Thank you,
Good night,
Edith.
lad.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Just a
Best of luck with your writing. Best
Yep.
of luck with everything.
I'll be back with you in a moment. Dear listeners, I do hope you enjoyed this episode 200 part 2, all male part 2, as much as my guests and I did. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I do hope you will tune in for another episode. Until next time.